Most people think they can't speak Swedish because they don't know enough words, or their grammar is not good enough. But that's actually not the real problem. The real problem is your brain, your mouth, and your mindset are not ready to let you speak. In this video, I'll break this down into two parts, the physical side and the psychological side. And more importantly, what you can actually do about them. Let's start with the physical side. What is actually happening when you try to speak? When you try to speak Swedish, this is what usually happens. You think in your own language, then you translate into Swedish, and then you try to say it. That's why you feel slow or stuck. But there is another reason that people often don't realize. It's not just about translation. It's also about retrieval. Most people understand much more Swedish than they can speak. In other words, you know more than you can say. You recognize the words when you hear them. You understand them when you read. But when you need to say something, the words are not there. Understanding a word and being able to use it are two different skills. I have a real example. My kids understand Chinese perfectly because I've been talking to them in Chinese since they were born. But they can't speak Chinese, and they find it very difficult to say something in Chinese. That's because they're not used to retrieving the words. And that's the same when you learn Swedish. If you don't practice retrieving words, they stay passive. Now let's talk about 3 techniques that you can use to tackle these issues. One simple way to make this easier is to reduce the load on your brain. Instead of trying to say long, complex sentences, keep it short. So instead of saying, I was thinking that maybe we should, just say, I think we should. It may feel too simple, but it works. Another thing that really helps is to start thinking in Swedish. Not perfectly, just basic thoughts. Things like, I want coffee. I'm taking a break. I'm going home. When I was learning English, one of my teachers told me, the day you start thinking in the language, everything changes. And that's actually true. It helped me with my English, and later my Swedish. And one more thing that makes a big difference. You need to practice retrieving words, not just recognizing them. So instead of only reading or listening, try to speak without help. If you have someone to practice with, that's perfect. But if you don't, you can practice with yourself. You can, for instance, describe your day, explain what you did, or talk about your plan for the weekend. Even if it's simple, even if it's not perfect. Because when your brain is forced to search for the words, that's when you actually start building speaking ability. Then there's the second physical barrier. It's not just your mouth. It's your tongue, your mouth muscles, even your throat. They're simply not used to the sounds of Swedish yet. And that's completely normal. It's like using muscles you haven't trained before. So how do you train these muscles then? Here are 3 simple exercises. The first one is speak out loud. Instead of waiting until you feel ready, start speaking. Even if it's just by yourself. You can read out loud, talk to yourself, describe what you're doing. It may feel a bit strange, but it works. Because the truth is, you cannot learn to speak without speaking. And something else that helps a lot here is not trying to build sentences from scratch every time. Instead, use small, ready-made phrases. For example, 要出外, I think that. 看你, can we. 要喝了 mad, I agree. When you have these phrases ready, speaking becomes much easier. And one last small but important thing, slow down. Most people try to speak too fast, then panic. If you slow down, your brain has more time to catch up. And actually, speaking slower makes you sound more confident and gives other people more time to process what you've said. So even if you know enough words and you're starting to train your brain and your mouth, speaking can still feel difficult. And for most people, the bigger challenge isn't physical, it's psychological. That is what really stops people from speaking. You may be thinking, what if I sound stupid? What if they don't understand me? What if I say something wrong? So instead, you stay quiet. But here is something important to realize. We judge ourselves much more than other people do. Most people are not analyzing your grammar or your pronunciation. They're just trying to understand you. And another thing, don't compare your Swedish to your native language. That's not a fair comparison. Of course you sound better in your native language. You've been speaking it your whole life. And here is something that might be uncomfortable, but it's important. If you learn a language as an adult, you will likely have an accent. That's normal, and it's not a problem. So don't let your accent stop you from speaking. And now, what if people don't understand you? In most cases, they will try. They might help you. They might guess what you mean. They might adjust. Because communication is a two-way effort. You'll be surprised how helpful people are. And in the end, it comes down to this. You don't become confident first, and then start speaking. You start speaking, and that's how confidence comes. That is something I experienced myself. I started learning English when I was very young, and passed many exams. But when I moved to England in my early 20s, I still struggled to speak and communicate in daily life. And later, when I moved to Sweden, I learned Swedish in about 6 months. And shortly after that, I started working in a Swedish-speaking company. And I wasn't fully ready, but I forced myself to use the language anyway. That's when things started to change. Not because my English or my Swedish was perfect, but because I was using them. I was making mistakes, feeling uncomfortable, but I was speaking, and that's how I became more confident and improved much faster. Speaking Swedish isn't about feeling ready. It's about starting before you're ready. Once you start using the language, everything begins to move. But even if you understand all this, many people still don't speak Swedish in real life. Not because they can't, but because of the environment they're in. That's what I'll talk about in the next video.